Dr. Ilara Voss adjusted her glasses as she stared at the blinking console screen before her. The outpost, a small research station orbiting a dying red star, was eerily quiet today. It had been months since she'd last spoken to another human being face to face. Her only companions were the hum of machinery and the occasional static-filled transmission from Earth. She sighed, brushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear, and leaned closer to examine the data streaming across her monitor. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the station, startling her. Red lights flashed along the walls, casting long shadows that danced unnaturally across the room. "What now?" Ilara muttered under her breath, rushing to check the source of the disturbance. The security feed showed something unexpected, an unidentified vessel docking without permission. Its sleek design was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Smooth curves etched with glowing patterns that pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. The ship seemed alive, almost organic. Ilara's heart pounded as she grabbed a handheld scanner and moved cautiously toward the airlock. When the door hissed open, revealing the figure standing there, Ilara froze. Before her stood a woman, but not quite human. She was tall, with shimmering skin that reflected light like liquid silver. Her eyes glowed softly, shifting between hues of blue and green, and her long hair floated gently around her head, as though caught in zero gravity. She wore armor adorned with intricate symbols that gleamed faintly in the dim light. "I came back for you," the stranger said, her voice resonating like a symphony of bells. Ilara blinked, confused. "Back? I don't know you." The alien tilted her head slightly, studying Ilara with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "You will remember," she replied cryptically. Before Ilara could respond, the station trembled violently. Alarms screamed louder, and warning messages flooded her visor display. Systems were failing. Power fluctuations rippled through the facility, causing sparks to fly from nearby panels. Lights flickered on and off, plunging the corridor into brief moments of darkness. "What's happening?" Ilara shouted over the noise, gripping the edge of a nearby console for balance. "There is no time to explain," the alien said urgently, stepping forward. "We must leave. Now." Ilara hesitated. Leaving the station meant abandoning years of work and potentially signing her own death warrant if this strange visitor turned out to be hostile. But something about the woman's presence felt familiar, unnerving yet comforting, as though buried memories were trying to surface. Another violent shake threw Ilara off balance, and the alien caught her arm with surprising strength. "Trust me," she urged, her glowing eyes locking onto Ilara's. With a deep breath, Ilara nodded. "Fine. But if you're lying..." She didn't finish the sentence, letting the threat hang in the air. The alien guided her quickly back to the mysterious ship. As they crossed the threshold, Ilara glanced over her shoulder one last time at the crumbling station. A part of her wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life, or the first step toward uncovering a truth far greater than she could imagine. Once inside, the door sealed shut behind them, and the ship hummed to life. Ilara gripped the railing tightly as it shot away from the outpost, leaving the chaos behind. For better or worse, her journey had begun, and she couldn't shake the feeling that everything she thought she knew was about to change forever. The core chamber of the collapsing space station was a cacophony of chaos. Alarms blared deafeningly, red warning lights flashed erratically, and the air crackled with energy as the seal holding back the Voidwalkers teetered on the brink of failure. Ilara stood at the center of it all, her body humming with power, but even she could feel the strain of what lay ahead. Sayra's voice echoed in her mind, calm, steady, reassuring. "You can do this. Trust yourself." But Sayra wasn't there anymore. Her essence now reinforced the seal, leaving Ilara to face the final battle alone. She clenched her fists, determination hardening her features. Voidwalkers poured into the chamber from every direction, their skeletal forms writhing like smoke given shape. Their glowing eyes locked onto Ilara, radiating hatred so intense it felt suffocating. They moved unnaturally, phasing through walls and twisting around debris, as if mocking her efforts to fight them. Ilara didn't hesitate. She raised her hands, summoning a barrier of shimmering light that encased the chamber. For a brief moment, the Void Walkers recoiled, unable to breach her defenses, but they quickly adapted, clawing at the edges of the barrier until cracks began to form. "You want me?" Ilara shouted, her voice echoing defiantly. "Come and get me." She unleashed a torrent of energy blasts, each one striking with pinpoint accuracy. Void Walkers disintegrated upon impact, their forms dissolving into wisps of shadow. Yet for every creature she destroyed, 2 more took its place. The sheer number of them was overwhelming, and the station groaned under the weight of the assault, its structural integrity failing by the second. Chunks of the ceiling collapsed, narrowly missing Ilara as she darted between attacks. Her movements were fluid, almost instinctual, guided by the memories of battles fought centuries ago. Every strike carried the weight of experience, every dodge born of survival. But she was tiring. The effort of maintaining both her barrier and her offensive capabilities drained her reserves faster than she anticipated. Sweat dripped down her face, and her arms trembled with exhaustion. Still, she pressed on, driven by the knowledge that giving up meant condemning billions to darkness. As the seal flickered dangerously, Syra's essence pulsed within it, lending strength to Ilara's resolve. She could almost hear Syra's voice again, urging her forward. Gathering every ounce of energy left in her body, Ilara focused on the seal itself. "This ends now," she whispered, stepping closer to the containment field. With a deep breath, she extended her hands, channeling all her remaining power into the seal. Light erupted from her fingertips, weaving through the cracks and reinforcing the barrier. The Void Walkers screamed in unison, their forms thrashing violently as they were pulled back into the void. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The chamber was bathed in blinding light, and Ilara felt herself being lifted off the ground, her entire being consumed by the surge of energy. Pain coursed through her veins, but she embraced it, knowing it was necessary. When the light faded, silence filled the room. The Void Walkers were gone, sealed away once more. The station, however, was beyond saving. Warning klaxons blared louder than ever, signaling imminent collapse. Ilara stumbled toward the exit, her legs weak and trembling. Just as she reached the doorway, a holographic projection appeared before her. Syra's smiling face, faint but unmistakable. "I'm proud of you," Syra said, her voice soft but clear. "Remember, I'll always come back for you." Tears blurred Ilara's vision as she activated her emergency pod. As the station exploded behind her, she clung to those words, vowing to honor Syra's sacrifice and prepare for whatever challenges still lay ahead. Her journey wasn't over. It never would be. The ship hurtled through the void, its engines roaring as it pushed toward their final destination, a collapsing space station that served as the last stronghold against the Void Walkers. Ilara sat quietly in the dimly lit chamber, staring at her hands. They trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what she had to do next. Syra's revelation about her people's role in awakening the Void Walkers still stung, but there was no time for anger or resentment. The fate of 2 galaxies rested on her shoulders now. Syra approached cautiously, her usual confidence replaced by an uncharacteristic vulnerability. "Ilara," she began softly, "we need to prepare you for what's coming. You must fully reclaim your power, the strength and knowledge buried within the seal." Ilara didn't look up. "And if I can't?" "You will," Syra said firmly. "You've done it before. But this time, you won't be alone." Reluctantly, Ilara nodded. She followed Syra to the center of the ship, where a glowing platform awaited them. Symbols etched into the floor pulsed with light, humming softly like a heartbeat. Syra gestured for Ilara to step onto it. "This ritual will connect you with the essence of who you once were," Syra explained. "But it will also bring pain from memories you've locked away for centuries." "I'm ready," Ilara said, though her voice wavered. As soon as she stepped onto the platform, the symbols flared brightly, surrounding her in a cocoon of energy. A surge of power coursed through her veins, sharp and searing, as fragments of her past flooded her mind. She saw herself leading armies, forging alliances, and making impossible choices. She relived moments of triumph and heartbreak. Most vividly, she remembered Syra, not just as a comrade, but as someone she had loved deeply. Their bond transcended galaxies and lifetimes, forged in fire and tested by loss. Tears streamed down Ilara's face as she realized how much she had sacrificed, not just her memories, but the person she had become alongside Syra. The pain grew unbearable, racking her body with spasms. She cried out, collapsing to her knees. Through gritted teeth, she whispered, "Why does it hurt so much?" "Because remembering means carrying everything again," Syra replied, her voice thick with emotion. "But you're stronger than the pain, stronger than they ever thought possible." Summoning every ounce of willpower, Ilara forced herself to stand. The energy around her intensified, lifting her off the ground as waves of light poured into her. Her body glowed brighter, her very presence radiating power. When the ritual ended, she landed softly on the platform, gasping for air. She felt whole. For the first time in centuries, the fractured pieces of her identity had come together. She understood who she was and what she had to do. "We're almost there," Syra said, her expression a mix of pride and sorrow. When they arrived at the station, chaos greeted them. Voidwalkers swarmed the corridors, phasing through walls and attacking anything that moved. Gravity fluctuated wildly, sending debris floating one moment and crashing the next. Ilara led the charge, wielding her newfound abilities with precision. Energy blasts erupted from her palms, obliterating enemies with ease. She created barriers to shield Syra and herself, buying precious seconds to advance deeper into the station. Finally, they'd reached the core chamber, where the seal holding the Voidwalkers at bay flickered weakly. Shadows spilled from cracks in the containment field, threatening to consume everything. "You know what to do," Syra said, stepping back. Ilara nodded, raising her hands. Light surged around her, forming a sphere of pure energy. With a final cry, she unleashed it, reinforcing the seal, but not without cost. As the barrier stabilized, Syra collapsed to the ground, her form dissolving into shimmering particles. "No," Ilara screamed, rushing to her side. "It's okay," Syra whispered, her voice fading. "I'll always come back for you." Her essence merged with the seal, ensuring its permanence. Ilara fell to her knees, grief overwhelming her, but she knew the fight wasn't over. It never would be. The ship descended through a thick haze of ash and debris, landing on the desolate surface of Kelthar. Once a thriving world teeming with life, it was now a graveyard of crumbling ruins and scorched landscapes. Ilara stepped out cautiously, her boots crunching against the brittle ground. The air smelled faintly of sulfur, and jagged spires of blackened stone stretched endlessly into the sky like fractured teeth. "This place," Ilara murmured, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "It feels wrong." "It should," Syra said quietly, standing beside her. Her luminous form seemed dimmer here, as if the planet itself drained her energy. Kelthar was once home to a great civilization, one that paid the ultimate price to seal away the Voidwalkers. "You were here too, during the final battle." Ilara frowned, trying to piece together fragmented memories. She could almost hear echoes of screams and explosions, feel the heat of flames licking at her skin, but the images slipped away before she could grasp them fully. "Why are we here?" she asked, turning to Syra. "To find answers," Syra replied, "and to awaken what's left of your past self." They moved deeper into the ruins, navigating narrow paths between collapsed buildings and shattered statues. Strange symbols carved into the stones glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with Ilara's heartbeat. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the planet resisted their presence. After hours of searching, they reached the heart of the city, a massive crater surrounded by towering obelisks etched with glowing runes. At its center stood a crystalline structure, shimmering faintly despite the gloom. It looked almost alive, its surface rippling like liquid glass. "This is it," Syra said, her voice filled with reverence. "The seal chamber. This is where you sacrificed everything to trap the Voidwalkers." Ilara approached hesitantly, her hand brushing against the cool surface of the crystal. As soon as her fingers made contact, a surge of energy coursed through her body. Visions flooded her mind, chaotic flashes of battles fought, allies lost, and choices made. She saw herself standing in this very spot centuries ago, surrounded by shadowy figures chanting in an ancient tongue. She held a glowing artifact in her hands, pouring every ounce of her strength into sealing the Voidwalkers away. But there was more. In the vision, she saw Syra, her face streaked with tears, as they embraced one final time before Ilara erased her own memories. "No," Ilara gasped, stumbling backward. The weight of those memories crushed her, threatening to pull her under. "I gave up so much. How could I forget all of this?" "You had to," Syra said gently, stepping closer. "Remembering would have broken you. But now, the seal is weakening. If we don't restore it, the Voidwalkers will escape, and nothing will stop them." Ilara clenched her fists, determination burning within her. "Then tell me what I need to do." Syra placed a hand on the crystal, causing it to glow brighter. "You must reconnect with your past self, the part of you still trapped inside the seal. Only then can you reclaim your full power." As Syra guided her through the ritual, the chamber began to hum with energy. The symbols around them flared to life, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Ilara closed her eyes, focusing on the fragments of her forgotten identity. Painful truths surfaced alongside memories of courage, love, and sacrifice. When she opened her eyes again, they gleamed with newfound resolve. Pieces of who she used to be clicked into place, merging with the person she had become. "We're running out of time," Syra warned, glancing nervously at the horizon. Shadows danced along the edge of the crater, growing darker by the second. Ilara nodded, gripping the holo-weapon at her side. "Let's finish this." Though the battle ahead loomed large, she no longer felt afraid. For the first time, she understood why she'd been chosen, and why Syra had come back for her. Together, they would fight to protect both their worlds. The alien ship moved silently through the vast emptiness of space, its sleek design slicing effortlessly through the void. Inside, Ilara sat stiffly in a seat that molded itself to her body, feeling both awestruck and uneasy. The interior was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Walls shimmered faintly with shifting colors, and strange symbols floated lazily in the air like glowing fireflies. It felt less like being inside a machine and more like stepping into another world entirely. Syra, as she had introduced herself, stood near what appeared to be the control panel, a circular platform pulsing with light. Her luminous eyes flickered toward Ilara, who still clutched the armrests tightly. "You are safe now," Syra said softly, her melodic voice cutting through the silence. "Safe? I don't even know where we're going, or why." Ilara snapped, frustration bubbling over. She hated feeling out of control, especially when so many questions hung unanswered. "Who are you, really? And what do you mean by I came back for you?" Syra hesitated before answering, her expression softening. "My name is Syra. We met once, long ago, at least from your perspective. To me, it feels like only days have passed." Ilara frowned. "That doesn't make any sense." "It will," Syra promised. "Time flows differently where I come from. What seems like centuries to you may feel like moments to me." Ilara opened her mouth to argue but stopped short. Something about Syra's words tugged at the edges of her mind, like half-forgotten fragments of a dream. She shook her head, dismissing the sensation. "Even if that's true, I don't remember meeting you. How can I trust you?" In response, Syra raised a hand, and one of the floating symbols expanded into a glowing orb. Images began to play within it. Scenes of battles fought among stars, shadowy creatures writhing like smoke, and a younger version of Ilara standing beside Syra, wielding weapons and powers Ilara couldn't comprehend. Ilara watched in stunned silence. The woman on the screen looked like her, yet not quite. It was as though she were seeing the stranger who shared her face. "Is this real?" she whispered. "It is," Syra replied. "These are memories of our time together. You saved my life, and countless others, during a war against beings called Voidwalkers. They sought to consume entire galaxies, feeding on fear and despair. You helped seal them away. But why don't I remember any of this?" Ilara demanded, her voice trembling. "You chose to forget," Syra explained gently. "The burden of those memories was too great. You erased them to protect yourself and humanity from their influence." Ilara's chest tightened. The images felt familiar, stirring emotions deep within her. Courage, grief, love, they all surged forward, overwhelming her. For a brief moment, she thought she could hear echoes of laughter, screams, and whispered promises. Then they vanished, leaving behind only confusion. "I need proof," Ilara said firmly, trying to steady herself. Syra nodded. "Very well. But first, you must learn to fight again. The Voidwalkers have returned, and they will not stop until everything is consumed. If we fail, your galaxy will fall next." Over the next few hours, Syra guided Ilara through basic combat training, using holographic simulations to recreate weapons and scenarios. To Ilara's astonishment, her body responded instinctively, as though muscle memory took over. She dodged attacks, fired energy blasts, and even summoned a protective shield without conscious effort. Yet each success left her more unsettled. Who was she, really? Was she just Dr. Ilara Voss, a scientist studying dying stars? Or was she someone else entirely, a hero buried beneath layers of forgotten time? As the session ended, exhaustion settled over Ilara. She collapsed onto the floor, sweat dripping down her face. Syra knelt beside her, concern etched across her radiant features. "You are stronger than you realize," Syra said quietly. "And soon, you'll remember everything. Until then, I'll stay by your side." Ilara looked up at her, searching for answers in those glowing eyes. For the first time since this bizarre journey began, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, Syra wasn't lying. The journey back to the ship was tense, each step weighed down by unspoken questions. Ilara's newfound memories had brought clarity but also suspicion. As they navigated the crumbling ruins of Kelthar, she couldn't shake the feeling that Syra was hiding something important. The alien woman's evasive answers during their earlier conversations gnawed at her trust. "Why didn't you tell me everything from the start?" Ilara finally demanded, breaking the silence. Her voice echoed sharply against the stone walls around them. Syra paused, turning to face her. "I told you what you needed to know when you were ready." "That's not good enough," Ilara shot back, her frustration boiling over. "You keep saying we fought together. We saved galaxies, but you haven't explained why my memories were erased in the first place, or why the Voidwalkers are back now, after all these years." Syra hesitated, her glowing eyes clouding with unease. "Some truths are difficult to hear." "Try me," Ilara snapped, crossing her arms. Syra sighed deeply and looked away, as if gathering her thoughts. When she spoke again, her voice carried a tone of reluctant honesty. "My people, we may have played a role in awakening the Voidwalkers." Ilara's heart sank. "What do you mean?" "They believe humanity, and beings like you, were too weak to handle the burden of guarding the seal forever. They thought testing your resilience would ensure survival. But I disagreed. I defied them to save you centuries ago, and I vowed to bring you back, no matter the cost." Ilara stared at her, anger and betrayal simmering beneath the surface. "So this is your fault?" You came here knowing full well what might happen. No, Syra insisted, stepping closer. I came because I care about you, because I couldn't let you face this alone again. My actions were driven by love, not malice. Ilara recoiled, stunned by the word love. It hung heavy in the air, adding another layer of complexity to their already fragile relationship. Before she could respond, the ground trembled violently, knocking them both off balance. They're here, Syra hissed, drawing her weapon. From the shadows emerged more void walkers, their skeletal forms darker and larger than before. Their hollow eyes burned brighter, radiating an aura of pure hatred. This time, there were too many to count. We can't fight them all. Ilara shouted, raising her own weapon. We don't have to, Syra replied grimly. We just need to hold them off long enough to reach the ship. The two women fought side by side, their movements synchronized despite the tension between them. Ilara unleashed bursts of energy, while Syra wielded her blade-like weapon with deadly precision. Each strike sent waves of light crashing against the encroaching darkness, but the Voidwalkers kept coming, relentless and insatiable. As they retreated toward the ship, one of the creatures lunged at Ilara, knocking her to the ground. She scrambled backward, firing wildly, but it was closing in fast. Just as its claws reached for her, Syra intervened, slashing through the creature with a fierce cry. Get up, Syra shouted, pulling Ilara to her feet. They ran the rest of the way, dodging attacks and narrowly avoiding collapse as the ruins crumbled around them. By the time they reached the ship, both were battered and breathless. Once inside, the ship roared to life, lifting off just as the Voidwalkers converged below. Ilara collapsed into a seat, glaring at Syra. You lied to me, she said coldly. I protected you, Syra countered, meeting her gaze without flinching. Even if you can't forgive me, remember this, I'll always choose you over anyone else. Ilara turned away, unsure whether to believe her or herself. The rift between them felt wider than ever, but the battle ahead left no room for doubt. Together or apart, they had to stop the Voidwalkers or risk losing everything. The days aboard Syra's ship blurred together for Ilara, each moment filled with training sessions that pushed her to her limits. The holographic simulations grew more intense, forcing her to adapt quickly to unfamiliar weapons and tactics. At first, she struggled, her movements clumsy, her aim off, but with every session, something inside her awakened. It was as if her body remembered what her mind had forgotten. Syra watched her closely, offering guidance when needed but mostly letting Ilara find her rhythm. You were always like this, Syra remarked one day, leaning against a glowing pillar while Ilara practiced deflecting energy blasts with a shimmering shield. Fierce, determined. Even when you doubted yourself, your instincts never failed you. Ilara lowered the shield, breathing heavily. If I was so amazing, why don't I remember any of it? She asked bitterly. The frustration gnawed at her, a constant reminder of how much she didn't know about herself. Because remembering would have destroyed you, Syra replied simply. Her voice softened. You carried too much pain, too many losses. Forgetting was the only way to keep going. Ilara turned away, staring at the shifting patterns on the walls. She wanted to believe Syra, to trust that these fragments of memory weren't lies. But doubt lingered. What if none of this was real? What if she was just losing her mind? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden jolt. The ship shuddered violently, throwing both women off balance. Alarms blared again, louder this time, and the soft glow of the walls dimmed, replaced by harsh red flashes. What's happening? Ilara demanded, gripping the edge of a console for support. Voidwalkers, Syra hissed, her expression darkening. She moved swiftly to the control panel, her fingers dancing over the glowing symbols. They found us. Ilara's stomach dropped. Voidwalkers, the shadowy creatures from the holographic memories, were no longer just stories. They were real, and they were here. Moments later, the temperature in the ship plummeted. A thick, icy mist seeped through the air, swirling unnaturally before solidifying into grotesque shapes. The Void Walkers emerge. Tall, skeletal figures made of writhing darkness, their hollow eyes glowing with malevolent light. Their presence felt suffocating, filling the room with an oppressive weight that made it hard to breathe. "Stay close," Syra commanded, drawing a weapon from her side. It hummed with energy, casting sharp beams of light across the dim chamber. Ilara hesitated, panic rising in her chest. But then, instinct took over. Without thinking, she reached for the holo weapon strapped to her belt, its form materializing in her hand. It felt natural, as though she'd used it countless times before. The Void Walkers lunged, their movements eerily fluid despite their jagged forms. Syra fired first, her shots tearing through the shadows, but not destroying them completely. Ilara followed suit, aiming carefully and firing bursts of energy. Each hit caused the creatures to recoil, but they kept coming, relentless and hungry. One of them broke past Syra's defenses, reaching out with claw-like hands toward Ilara. She reacted instantly, raising her shield just in time to block the attack. The force of the impact sent her stumbling backward, but she managed to steady herself. Summoning courage she didn't know she had, she swung her weapon in an arc, slicing through the creature's torso. It let out a piercing shriek before dissolving into nothingness. When the last Void Walker vanished, the ship stabilized, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. Ilara sank to her knees, trembling. Every nerve in her body screamed in exhaustion. Yet beneath the fatigue was a spark of triumph and fear. "They're getting stronger," Syra said grimly, holstering her weapon. She knelt beside Ilara, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "And they'll keep coming until the seal is restored or broken." Ilara looked up at her, sweat mingling with tears on her face. "How do I stop them?" "You already know how," Syra replied. "You just need to remember." As Ilara stared into Syra's glowing eyes, another fragment of memory surfaced, a fleeting vision of herself standing on a battlefield, surrounded by fire and shadow. She saw Silra beside her, their hands clasped tightly as they fought together. And for the first time, she believed, not just in Syra, but in herself. The war wasn't over. Not yet. The emergency pod jettisoned into the vast expanse of space, its thrusters sputtering as it carried Ilara away from the wreckage of the collapsing station. She sat slumped in the small cockpit, her body aching and her mind heavy with grief. The silence around her was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the pod systems. For the first time since this journey began, she allowed herself to feel everything: the loss, the pain, the weight of what she had endured. Syra was gone. Her presence, once so vivid and alive, now lingered only in fragments of memory and the quiet echo of her final words. "I'll always come back for you." Ilara replayed those words over and over in her mind, clinging to them like a lifeline. They were a promise, and a reminder that their bond transcended even death itself. As the pod drifted through the void, Earth came into view, a pale blue dot suspended against the infinite blackness. It felt strange to return after all this time, knowing how much had changed, not just in the universe, but within herself. She wasn't the same woman who had left the research outpost months ago. That version of Ilara seemed almost foreign now, a distant shadow compared to the warrior she had become. When the pod touched down on Earth, authorities quickly surrounded it, their voices crackling through radios as they assessed the situation. Ilara emerged slowly, shielding her eyes from the bright sunlight. She looked different, stronger, more resolute, but also weary, as though carrying the weight of entire galaxies on her shoulders. Questions came at her from all sides. Who was she? Where had she been? What had happened to the alien vessel that had docked at the outpost? Ilara answered as best she could without revealing too much, careful to protect humanity from truths it wasn't ready to face. In the weeks that followed, she settled back into life on Earth, though settling hardly described it. Every night, she stared out her window at the stars, searching for signs of Syra, or answers to questions she couldn't voice. During the day, she dedicated herself to sharing the knowledge she'd gained, teaching others about the dangers lurking beyond their galaxy, while subtly preparing humanity for future threats. One evening, as she stood beneath a clear sky filled with constellations, something caught her eye. A cluster of stars shimmered brighter than the rest, forming a pattern she recognized instantly. It was Syra's armor, etched into the heavens like a celestial tribute. Ilara smiled faintly, tears welling up in her eyes. "You kept your promise," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Though Syra was no longer physically present, her influence remained. Ilara felt it in every decision she made, every lesson she taught, every moment she chose hope over despair. Their love had spanned lifetimes and dimensions, defying even the boundaries of existence. As the wind rustled softly around her, Ilara turned away from the stars and stepped back inside. She had work to do, plans to make, lessons to share, battles yet unseen to prepare for. But for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. Because somewhere, somehow, Syra was still with her, watching, guiding, waiting. And if history proved anything, it was that when the darkness returned, as it inevitably would, Ilara wouldn't have to face it alone. The story ended not with closure, but with renewal. With each step forward, Ilara carried the past within her, honoring those who had sacrificed everything so she could continue fighting. Her journey wasn't over. It never truly would be. But for now, under a sky full of stars, she found peace, and that was enough.